Good evening, everyone, and welcome. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to the New Delhi World Book Fair 2026. Today, we have with us Vijender Sharma, an entrepreneur, history enthusiast, columnist, and author who writes about the lesser known dimensions of Indian history. His work is known for avoiding heavy academic jargon and making historical material engaging for both students and general readers. Vijender ji has previously written essays on Indic history and the cusp years 500 years of Hindu resistance and has contributed columns to News 18, First Post, Swarajya, and The Print. His latest book, The Rise of Ancient Indians, Their Cities, Art, Trade, and Science, published by Blue One Inc. in collaboration with FIHCR, the Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research. Written in an accessible style, the book highlights how ancient Indians built cities, traded across continents, developed knowledge systems, and experimented with art and science. It includes illustrations, maps, interactive activities designed to spark curiosity, making it ideal for young readers, families, and classrooms. It is now available in six regional Indian languages, including Hindi, Marathi, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, and Kannada, and has been warmly received by both parents and children. Vijender ji, a very warm welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gayatri ji. It's been a pleasure to be here as part of the Meet and Greet, and I'm really looking forward to a wonderful session with you.
Okay, so to begin with, let's just start with the book. Could you please tell us what this book is about a little more in detail?
Yeah, so this book is for children who are not interested in history. This can be a little, how do I say, paradoxical that, a book for children who are not interested in history. I have written this book from the point of view of somebody who is interested, curious, but doesn't want to go into details of chronology and, the dates, etc. So this book is a very easy and light read and yet informative for children who want to know more about our own history and of different aspects. So it covers from, as the title suggests, city building, art, medicine, science, trade, etc. So it gives a holistic picture of our history.
So, if you had to paint a picture for our young readers, if you had to paint a picture of ancient India, very briefly, what do you think you would say? What did it look like? What did ancient India look like?
Well, this is a very interesting question. I would say that ancient India was both different and similar to modern India. So if we say remove all the 20th century inventions, electricity, machines, and then we go back to a time where everything was done using hands, and we get ancient India. And so in terms of our society, the languages we speak, it's more or less similar what ancient Indians did. Uh, the kind of society we live in, the cities, there were cities, big cities back in ancient times. There were, mediocre cities, villages, rural areas, industrial sections, residential sections in the city. It was much like what we have today in our modern metropolis like Delhi. They also had a system of, tax collection, sanitation, traders area. All those things were present in ancient India, which we have today. But of course, those things were done without mechanization and electricity. So I would say we are one of the only civilizations on Earth which share an unbroken bond from our ancient history.
Right. Okay, that is really well explained. So, a lot of people, so do not get offended by this question, but a lot of people wonder why history matters at all. Now, if it's past, right, it's gone. Why should children, especially, care about something that happened 1,000 years ago? Does it matter? How would you tell children that why history matters today? Why it matters something that happened some 1,000 years back?
Yeah, I would say history is informative. Yes, you get to know who was ruling 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. But history is not just about chronology and the kings and the dates. We have much to learn from history. I'll give you an example of Dholavira. It's a Harappan city, and it has a wonderful system of water conservation. Now you bring that concept of water conservation to 21st century, even today, right now, and so many of our cities suffer from water problem, water scarcity. We don't have enough water to support the population. So they had a similar problem. Thalavira was in the middle of a shallow sea. They had great problems with access to clean drinking water. So they invented a system of reservoirs around their city where they could store the storm water during monsoons and use it for rest of the year. So there are lessons for us to be learned from our history. People back then also had faced similar problems like we do today. As I said, ancient India and modern India are not two different Indias.
Yeah.
It's just India without mechanization is ancient India. So they had the same problem of water, and they developed an ingenious system to desalt the water, store the water, cascade it from one reservoir to the next. So mechanisms for cleaning it, maintaining it, to fund how to fund the system of excavating, maintaining. There were people who were paid salary, probably.
Yeah.
So we have all those problems, and these small details from our history gives a lot of information to us on how we can tackle our modern day problems. So in that regard, I think history is very important. We should know our history.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned right now, that our ancient civilizations were well planned, structured, and but if the word itself, ancient. So, where people think that when you say ancient India, people describe it usually as something very backward. If I'm correct, if I'm using that word correctly, basically for it not being scientific or innovative. This belief is there even today. So all these cities, these civilizations, if it was so advanced, maybe not mechanic but advanced, why does this belief even exist today, especially compared to the Western civilizations? These are ancient Indian civilizations are still considered as something dating quite backwards. So why is that so, and how can that belief be changed?
Okay, I think this is a very interesting question again. The belief that ancient India was backward, I would say there are mixed responses to that. Some people believe that anything that was old is bad, and everything which came during the medieval times or later is supposed to be good. Or even there's a section of society who thinks that colonization was a boon to us because we got railways.
Yes.
So there are different kinds of views when we talk about the social status of our ancient civilization. This probably came because of how the history was written, how who were the gatekeepers of history back then, and how they wanted to project India. So it depends on what happened at that time, and this is changing slowly. And I think that when we talk about these small things that I gave you one example, there is another example I would like to give, which is very topical, I would say, today when we talk about America, 500% tariffs and trade wars. The Indian traders were manufacturing goods to be traded as far as Egypt.
Yeah.
Almost 2000 in 2000 BCE. So Indian ships, not as big as we have them today, but smaller ships with a lot of stops. They were sailing westwards to Aden, and then to Arabian Sea, and then Red Sea, and then ports of Rome and Egypt. So I want to say that with a kind of entrepreneurship of a society, we can't and should not call that as backward.
Yeah.
And backward is again a very relative word. It's a very relative subject. Like what is backward, and for something can be backward for a section of society, at the same time it will not be backward for the other section of society.
Right.
So it's a perception that people have, and I think history should be seen objectively for what it was, and not should not be compared with the standards of 21st century.
So now you have written this very beautifully illustrated book. Now, but when we ask people, or especially when we ask children, they say they don't find the subject that interesting because they think it is mostly. If you now, in fact, if you ask non-history students or non-humanities students, we usually have this perception that when it comes to history, it's mostly dates, dynasties, etc., etc. To some extent, it's correct as well because, to be fair, that is how it is often taught at schools. Even when I was at school, it was taught that way. So, what do you think needs to change in that? And has it changed till now? Do you think there is some change in that process? Or if not, what is the change? How can that change where children will be more attracted towards history?
History, as I've been saying, it's not just about chronology and kings, it's about stories. And history, as I think, should be taught as a story of times which has gone by, which sometimes we have a record of that, sometimes we don't have a record of that. But how do you tell the story of a society which was thriving 5,000 years ago? And sadly, we don't have literature to support that. Unlike Western civilization, which have left a lot of scriptures on walls and papyrus, etc. In case of Egypt, we don't have that. But how do we reconstruct that history? So we have to look beyond the obvious. So when we uh, say the Harappan drainage system, everybody knows, everybody reads about it, but nobody goes beyond that information. It's just a piece of information that there was a drainage system. But there is a whole lot that happened before that. Like, how did the cities came to think about it? How did the cities decide who will build the system? How was the system financed? Were people being taxed? How were they taxed? What was taken as taxes because there was no money back then? And how did these engineers learn to build that system? So it is a slow process which probably got evolved over centuries into what we see today in excavation at the sites of the Harappan civilization. So this is the story which becomes interesting, which prompts the children to think beyond the obvious and think beyond what's being told to them. So I think it's very important that uh, as authors and even academics, we change the approach of teaching history. Yes, dates are important, but they are not the only thing. And I'm happy because my first book, you mentioned the essays on Indic history. There I have tried to raise all these questions. Even this book has those questions. And I was looking at the NCRT book the other day, and I was happy to see a suggestion, sort of a discussion point for children to think how the drainage system was, who was behind that. So I think somebody picked up that book came in 2020. So I don't know. I would be, tempted to claim credit for that, but I don't know who actually suggested it. But it's a good thing that the books are talking about that. They are prompting children to think beyond what's, in the books.
Okay. So maybe you take us through a little more through this book. So how have you approached it? Where does it start? What is the timeline? Because of course, when you say ancient India, that period is very long, right? It's quite comprehensive, especially for kids, for them to understand. So if we ask you from where did you start, how did you approach the book, the categories or anything, just maybe the chapters a little bit.
Yeah. It was quite challenging when the FISCR, approached me with the proposition that something for children should be written, and I thought really hard about it, how to make history interesting for children. And the first thought that I had in my mind was to skip chronology and kings. I will not talk about that. I'll not talk about wars, who won and who lost, and who built, what, because those things children are anyway sort of reading in their textbooks. My idea and approach was to make history interesting, and I did not want to fixate on a period, like not just talk about the say Harappan civilization. I wanted to cover a little bit more so that children get at least a basic idea. This is not an academic book; it's an informative book. So the information you get from here is on uh, how we as a society lived back then. So I start from prehistory and then move on to the Harappan civilization, and then eventually I also talk about another very lesser known aspect of India, the Eastern India, where trade started with Southeast Asia almost 2000 around 2500 BCE, and we have evidence from there. Then of course there was a lot of cultural exchange, social exchange, trade that happened. I also introduced an interesting concept to sort of link it with how the Europeans colonized the Americas and how the Indians went about, uh, you know, sort of integrating into Southeast Asia, not colonizing it, but integrating. So the concept is same. The Europeans went to the Americas and they found a new land and they started exploiting it. The Indian traders also found a new land in Southeast Asia, but they sort of integrated themselves into the society instead of colonizing them. They did not take away their resources and brought it back to India. They started trading with them. They started supplying goods to them and taking raw material from them. In that event, the cultural exchange happened, languages changed, and they sort of architecture was influenced, and a lot of Indian influence happened, which is still there even after so many years. So this is exactly how the history should be approached, right? Instead of, so that's what I say. And I also have a chapter on the southern Indian dynasty of Cholas, which again we do study them in northern India, but it's very concise in a smaller way. So I have tried to bring about things which children might not know about the Cholas. So my idea was to cover a broader range of ancient India, where we can talk about different things and it stays interesting for the children. They don't get bored studying about one particular era of history, because child needs to know different things. And that interest has to remain while reading the book. And of course, the illustrations do a wonderful job. So that again was something that we talked about with FASCR, and I myself, we decided that we will have illustrations to keep the children engaged.
That's great. I mean, I have gone through the book, and the illustrations are really beautiful. Not just illustrations, but puzzles and games as well. I think that is also another way where children can find history interesting. Some activities to keep them, more interested.
I would like to add here that the activities are designed in a way that some of them can be completed by the children themselves. Some of them, however, require some efforts on the parents' part.
Okay.
So, and it was deliberate, because sometimes what happens is the parent buys the book and says, "Jao padho." But yeah, the child also, when we get to an exercise where the parent's intervention is required, he or she will go back to the parent and say, "How should I do it? Help me."
Yeah.
The parent also gets involved, and that is how the interaction starts. So the parent also understands what is the child reading, and how inquisitive the child is, and it becomes a loop of positive feedback.
And the feedback is really positive, because I have read the reviews, and parents especially have said that this is something their kids enjoy, because it's a very simple read. It's not a complicated book. It's, although the subject is very vast, the language I use is very simple, so parents especially have loved it. So that is great. So I just another thing that I asked my cousins, who are siblings, who are quite young now. I had asked them if they like history and what they think, how India looked like, how Bharat looked like. And when they say about ancient India, they say, I don't see anything other than a banyan tree, and people sitting beneath it and wearing dhotis and sitting around and, studying. So I have noticed this, that as children, especially when they know way more about our other ancient civilizations outside Bharat, be it Greece, be it Egypt, be it Rome. They have read it in their picture books, but that doesn't happen with India. Maybe now things have changed a little, but the focus on our civilization, on ancient India. Of course, when it comes to college and everything, it's a different thing. We go into it. But children, do you think it is at a young age that they should be introduced with all these realities? Or, like, do you think there's a particular age for it? Or do you think it should be done way later when they understand the gravitas of it?
I think there is no real age for children to be taught, because we start teaching children, right from their infant infancy. We start telling them this is good and this is bad, and don't go there and sit down. Or we give them instructions. They slowly learn those instructions. But there's really no age, the right age, I would say. And what is important is the right language.
Yes.
So you have to write in a way, in a language which is easy to understand for that particular age group. Now this book is for 6th class.
Yeah.
Now one can also write a book for, say, children under 6 years of age, which will be very heavy on images.
Yeah.
And very few texts would be there, but there will be a lot of images to explain.
Yeah.
So I think there is no real age for right age, I would say, when children should be taught history.
Okay. Okay. So, another thing for children growing up in metropolitan cities like Delhi, NCR, Mumbai, they have seen just modernity. When I say modernity, I mean with the mechanics and everything.
Yes.
So, for children who grow up away from, say, suppose village area or countryside, what do you think is the best way for them to know a little more about our history, to get a maybe visual representation? And apart from books, I mean, books, of course, it is very essential. But apart from books, if a kid here in Delhi says that, Mama, I want to know about Bharat's history, I want to see something which connects me to back then. What do you think would be the best way?
But there are many options, irrespective of where one lives. I'll take the example of Delhi, where there are children in Delhi who are inquisitive about history. They can go to a museum. We have a few museums in Delhi which show our history in a very nice way. The National Museum will eventually shift to its new premises, and I really hope that they do a good job there. And even the current museum has so much history. I mean, the display, we can talk about, disagree about displays there, but there is a lot of information there. And what I think parents should do is not just take your children to a museum, because it will not serve any purpose. The parent should understand and read about the history, or at least pick 5 artifacts in the museum, read about them, and then take the child with them or the children with them, and then explain what are they looking at, and again explaining in a very interesting manner, not just this was made 2000 years ago. I mean, that information is of no use to a child. It's old, that's all he'll take back.
Yes.
But if you give the backstory, who built it, why was it built, were there any texts written there, and what happened later, how did it end up in the museum, the parent has to do a little hard work and give that story to the child, and then the museum visit becomes interesting. And then the child would for the second time say, "Mujhe dobara dekhna hai, I missed that artifact, and I want to." Or when they go to a different city, they would say, "Where is the museum? I want to go to the museum." Because if the parent is not interested and invested, then going anywhere to know about our history is really futile. Apart from museums, there are also old forts. There are a lot of old forts in India. Parents can take children there, and again with some background information with themselves, and then they can sort of unload that information onto the child in an interesting manner.
Yeah. So it is not just about learning or teaching, but it is about conversation, which should happen between the parents and children. Okay, so an interesting question I want to ask you: if you could bring back one object from ancient India to show to show children, what would it be? Or maybe I can tweak that question a little if you want. If you had a time machine and you could yourself go there, or maybe you can ask the children, which time or which place would you send them for them to learn a little more about how ancient Bharat looked like?
Well, this requires again imagination on my part. I think I will take them back to one of the eastern coast seaports. Probably down south in Tamil Nadu, or maybe up north in West Bengal. One of the ports where international trade is happening, because that is the place where if we take the example of Machilipatnam, it's in Andhra Pradesh. Machilipatnam used to be a very busy port in ancient times, and it was not just Indians. The Southeast Asians were coming there, the Romans were coming there, the Chinese were coming there. So if you compare Machilipatnam of say I don't know 1000 BCE, it was the Dubai of today. The multicultural, multilinguistic, a lot of trade happening, lot of money exchanging hands, lot of goods. You would be looking at ivory, and you would be looking at sandalwood, and looking at spices and Chinese silk and whatnot. So one can imagine, the kind of languages those people spoke. The Chinese and the Romans and conversing in different languages. How were they understanding each other? Was there an interpreter for them? Were there people, multilingual people, who would help transactions? So it's one of those fascinating times where a child would also get so fascinated with listening to so many languages, people dressed in different costumes, not costumes, different clothes. It would be a true emporium in its true sense, and that would be. I mean, I talking about it, I am getting sort of ideas of how that time would be, and I think for the child it would be really fascinating to see something, something which we talk about today. Like in Dubai, there are Indians and Pakistanis and Bangladeshis, and Spaniards, and French and Americans. Machilipatnam was one such city where you had many ethnicities, many nationalities, many languages, many cultures, many goods, all at one place in one time. So it's very interesting for me. It would be very interesting to go back to that time.
I think it will be, and I would like that. So I will open the stage for questions now. Anyone in the audience who would like to ask any questions to Vijender ji, we can pass on the mic to them. Just raise your hands, please.
Mr. Sharma and
Gayatri.
right?
Gayatri.
Gayatri,
Yeah.
thanks. This was a very fascinating conversation. I was just imagining Machilipatnam in my own head, by the way, as you're saying. The question I have is, in today's days and world, I heard that you're an entrepreneur also. How did this entire sort of writing a book on Indian ancient history came into your mind in the first place? I understand this is not your first book, but what was the process? And many people are enthusiastic on many things. How did you convert that process into actually writing a book? If you can tell that a little bit.
Thank you so much for the question. The answer is, like, I have been always been interested in history, but like many children, I found it very boring because of the chronology and the dates and etc. It was very difficult for me to remember all those things. But then I came across a different kind of books which were not chronology heavy, and then I had, I was exposed to a different genre of history where history could be told in a different way as a story, and that is when I read so many of those books, and eventually I realized that there is so much on West Asia, there's so much on Europe, but there's very little concentrated information on Indian history, especially the lesser known aspects of history. And that's how the seed of putting those information together and writing a book came to be. And during COVID, when everybody had a lot of time at their hand, so I was one of them, and I sort of edited that first draft and started working on it and published it in 2020. And that's how the first book came up. And of course, then after that, I wrote another book, and then this is the third one. I also did a Hindi translation of my first book recently. So, I mean, it's again a mixed combination of passion, my personal passion for history, and once you taste that, I got really positive feedback for my first book, and that encouraged me to write the second and the third book. So, yeah, that's how it happened.
So, two parts. One, what is your future plan in terms of are we going to see another children book on history? And the second part is basically in this time and age where attention span is really short, and you have children whose attention span, I'm guessing, is shorter. Uh, how do you see your book transcending the pages to, say, an Instagram or social media?
This is, I think, comparison with social media and books is every author's nightmare. How does one grab attention? But we'll come to that. Uh, First, I'll answer your question about the future plans. Yes, there might be a second book for children. I I probably will come up with the second phase of this is about ancient India. Maybe the second book will be about the medieval history. So yes, the plans are there, and I hope that they would materialize soon. Now, coming to the comparison and how an author should uh, compete for, we are not competing for shelf space with other authors. We're competing with mind space of even adults, not just children. Even adults have very short attention span these days because those 20-second reels have spoiled our mind. So you one has to keep the interest of the reader intact on every single page. You cannot afford to be, write something which is not interesting. So you have to keep some piece of information which forces the reader to turn the page, and that is the real challenge. The content is not the real challenge today, because content is there, and you can think of a subject and do a research and go to primary sources and get everything. You can write a 200-page book, you can write a 500-page book, but the challenge is how do you keep the reader, uh, you know the attention of the reader on every page, and that is very, very challenging, and that only comes if you identify areas which makes you hooked to a certain thing, and then you can probably recreate or replicate that idea in a book. Like every few pages there has to be some interesting bit which the reader think, oh acha, this is interesting, maybe something more is coming. So you have to keep the reader engaged. And yes, I mean, it's probably easier in fiction. If you're writing a murder mystery or something, you can always put in a few crumbs and then the reader gets hooked. But in history, how do you do that? It's challenging. I think a lot of authors are facing that challenge, and I just hope that we are able to create that hook for non-fiction as well.
Thank you. Any other question from the audience? Um, okay, I think this is it. Last thing, Vijender ji, for young readers who want to pick up this book or anyone, what message would you like to give them?
Now, this might be a boring message that you should read books is eventually the message that every author probably wants to give to young children. But I would say read and ask questions, because what we do, especially with non-fiction, is we read and we say, "Acha, okay." The child, and not just the child, anybody who's reading a non-fiction should challenge everything. They should ask, okay, not because it's written in the book, it has to be true, but is there a source cited? Where is the source? Is the source authentic? How was this claimed? If there's a claim made in a history book, where is it coming from? Are two people quoting each other? When this happens, this circular referencing, I write a book, you write a book, and we start quoting each other. Yeah. There's no third person to quote from. This becomes a circular referencing, which is a lie, basically. So you have to question everything. Why is it happening? If I'm saying that there were reservoirs in Dhalavira, you should not blindly believe me. You should ask where is this reference coming from? Who excavated it? When was it done? Was it really in a reservoir? Or was it a, why can't it be a storage for grains? Yeah. Who told you that it is reservoir for water? There is no inscription there. So I would suggest children, and not only while reading books, even in school, anything they get curious about, they should ask questions. And same advice I'll give to the parents. If a child asks you a question and you don't have the answer, don't dismiss the question. Because I can understand for a parent to say, "Mujhe nahi pata," is sort of, demeaning at times. But you have to say that I don't know now. I will read and get back to you. You just do that, because that's how a child will be encouraged to question you. If you start dismissing the child, he or she will never ask questions to anybody, not Yeah. just you, but anybody. Office, society, the child will only start, following orders, and that is not a society We don't want that society.
Yeah.
So encourage children to ask questions. If you don't have the answers, go back. There is Google today. Ask Google anything. There are 10 variants. Choose one and give it to your child. But ask questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Vijendraji, for your insightful words. And I really hope people do pick up this book for their children. So we will start the author signing here. So anyone who is interested in getting the book signed, they can come here and get it signed from here. Thank you so much, Vijendraji, and thank you so much, everyone.